do you think? We ready? All right. Well, welcome back. Welcome. Good morning, everybody. If you don't know me, I'm Kit Novotny. I'm the new young adult minister, and it's my delight and privilege to get, as the most recent incoming staff member, to get to sit here with our outgoing senior minister, Patricia DeYoung, and ask a few questions. And this will be a conversation between us, but between all of us, and we may have some time for extra questions at the end. So most of you probably know that this is Pat's second to last Sunday with us as our senior minister. Yes, okay, collective sob, that's good. And collective rejoicing. So we're celebrating this morning 21 years. If Pat's ministry was a person, it could legally go to bars, so.
I saw that.
So that's pretty impressive. But it's a celebration too of the amazing life and ministry that's been had here in this place, and also your ministry. So when were you ordained, Pat?
1980.
1980, and some people may not know that you were ordained here at this church, but you were telling me that it wasn't in the sanctuary, it was in the hall of entrance. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about your journey to that point, and now here, many years later, as you're preparing to again go out beyond these doors, beyond these walls, how that feels now.
Sure. I think many people know a lot about my story of coming into ministry, but I'll tell you just that part. I really went to seminary kind of on a whim. I wanted to get a master's in theology and the arts, and after I was in seminary for 6 months, it just hit me. I didn't want to get a master in theology and the arts. I wanted to be a minister. And it was right at the time that women were going to seminary for the first time. It was kind of the outbreak of the second wave of feminism. This was 1972. And I was in a Dutch Calvinist setting and congregation, and of course they wanted nothing of it. So I basically was sent to seminary by one of my professors at Western Michigan University, and I went. It was amazing, but I had no denomination. So instead of supporting me in this endeavor, my denomination just ignored me and basically said, you're on your own, go away. And that really sent me on a search. I went for a while in care of the Presbyterian Church, and then they had the More Light General Assembly in San Diego, where they said, there is yet more light and truth to be shed upon the subject of open and affirming. And I felt I couldn't be part of a denomination that didn't support everyone for ordination, and so I had to leave the Presbyterians. I was a campus minister at the University of Oregon, and they loved the work that I did, and so that body, after my second year, invited me to be Methodist, and in my first, I loved the work of doing campus ministry so much that I said to that search committee, sure, I'll be Methodist in order to do this job. And I got back down here and I thought, I can't be a Methodist. I am a Calvinist. And at that point, I was working as a campus minister at the University of California here at Berkeley, up at Unitas. And I kind of decided I'm never going to be ordained. What's going to happen to me? I'm so glad that Helen Reese is in my view. Because David Reese, senior minister of this church, called me up one afternoon and said, we think the work you're doing is fantastic. Will you come and be a member of our congregation, and I will help you be ordained? And 2.5 years later, I was ordained in the Hall of Entrance. Helen was so generous this past fall in giving me a set of books that David had been reading before he died, with the bookmarkers and all the places where David had stopped reading. And she also gave me a copy of his ordination prayer that he gave over me on January 13, 1980. So I was ordained in the Hall of Entrance because I wanted so much to make that place between the church and the university. I felt that was who I was. By that point, I had done 3 campus ministries and was also now at the San Francisco State University as the director of the Ecumenical House. So I really thought my future was going to be in campus and university ministries, and was surprised when I got my first call to a congregation, which was Riverside Church in New York City, 4 years after I was ordained.
So I've heard a little bit about your time at Riverside and other places. Can you, as you're reflecting on other people who've shaped your journey and your life in ministry, other mentors or people so I think everyone here has been touched by your ministry, whether we're on your search committee or feel like we came a little late to the party and are just getting to meet you. But can you just share a little bit about people who touched your life and shaped you?
I think today I'd like to choose 2 just for time, and I think most people know that William Sloane Coffin was just an amazing and remarkable mentor. And I think that in the deep, how Bill shaped me was to do politics and religion, and to be always concerned about the world beyond the church, and to always have a sense that justice is not only within, but justice has to be without, so that the church always needs to be focused outward and always needs to turn toward the world as a strong community. My parents were not in favor of my being a minister or impressed with my being a minister until they met William Sloane Coffin and began to worship at Riverside Church. And then they did a massive change and really left at that point being good Dutch Calvinists and good Christian Reformed people and got on the religion and politics bandwagon. And they also were transformed, I think, by Bill's ministry and life. And the second person, so I'm saying it, I think, partly for you, but it's Jim Gilliam. And Jim was the senior minister of Plymouth Church in Des Moines, where you have come from. And when he wanted me to work with him in Des Moines, and I chose to have my own congregation. But then his cottage and my cottage were 1.5 miles apart on Lake Michigan. And Jim, over the years, every time I went back, through all these summers that I've gone back to the lake, Jim and I have met and had lengthy conversations about what it means to be a congregational minister and what it means to be a pastor. And I feel that Jim, over the years, pastored me deeply in the art and skill of congregational life and learning how to be a truly good pastor. And there are 2 departing gifts to me, and they both gave me a gift at their retirement. Bill, at his retirement, did this amazing thing. Bill said yes to everything. People came in and said, "Would you bless my frog in Tennessee?" And he'd get on a plane and go to Tennessee and bless the frog. I mean, he was amazing. And Jim said no to everything. He really said, "I'm going to have a retired life." And I think my answers are going to be somewhere in between. I think I'm going to choose to say yes to a whole lot of things and also no to some others.
You mentioned your parents a little bit. One of the questions we received from the congregation was if you could share a little bit about how your mother influenced your life. And you touched on the complexity of that, your choice to go into ministry.
Yeah. Well, my mother was the granddaughter of a Dutch Calvinist dominee, and she was a middle child, and so she wanted to keep the peace. And she was raised in a Dutch Calvinist ethos, and my mother remained somewhat of a literalist through most of her life. I remember one time her running over to my father and saying, Les, Pat doesn't believe in the 7 days of creation." So, it was a long journey for my mother and I. And I truly believe that her faith was strengthened through my kind of liberal and progressive and outsized view of the world and the desire to, be in the world. I mean, that's something that Dutch Calvinists don't do. You kind of gather in and hunker down and take care of your own little culture. And I think that her faith was strengthened through my wanting so badly to break those chains. And my deep faith was strengthened through my mother, who gave me always unconditional, ecstatic love. And if you've ever watched a mother look at a child and see that mother love brimming through her life into her child, that was my mother's love for her children. She had an unconditional, ecstatic way of loving us, and I'm still grateful for that today.
So as you reflect back on 30 plus years doing this ministry thing, and also just in your life, if you could talk to your younger self, what would you say?
Have more fun. I think I took ministry seriously for a really long time, and so I disallowed myself a lot of relaxation and fun. I think thankfully my last 10 years, 11 years here at FCCB, I've had so much fun. And I think that somewhere along the way I learned not to take myself so seriously or the art of ministry so seriously. But I felt, I think especially going to Riverside at a young age and also relatively inexperienced, I felt like I had so much to learn. And so I scrambled for many years. And I also feel that being called here, which was in those days, now we think nothing of it, but being called here, it was a challenge to be the first woman senior minister of a larger mainline congregation. And I was among the first in our denomination, and so I took that pretty seriously, and I didn't have a lot of fun in the beginning. But I think thankfully the last 11 years, I'll say a couple of things about that. I think marrying Sam has been a lot of fun. So thank you for that, Samuel. And I think things here, the emerging leaders have been so much fun. I think the second worship service just opened up a whole different way of singing and worshiping and being for me, and I hope for all of us. And then having folks like you come in, and I think Rachel may not be here. That's been...
There she is.
Hi, Rach. That's been so much fun, and I've absolutely loved working with you. And I have to say, because I may not have another place to say it, that working with Phil Porter for such a long time has been more fun than you can ever imagine to have. You know, and it's a funny thing with Phil and I, because we don't really talk that much, and we don't really socialize, and but we have gone through life like this, and I feel like we're twins from different mothers, but
brother from another mother.
Yeah. Our, what did I hear last night? A sister from another mister.
Yeah.
That might be us, Phil.
So as you reflect, you were saying some things that were fun. Are there other moments, thinking back on maybe, your last few years here, moments in worship where you felt like this, God is here, God is moving among this community, or maybe other moments?
Well, I think some ministers don't worship. They are so caught up in everything that needs to happen and all that needs to be done, but I think that God gave me the gift of worship, that I always worship, and I always feel a sense of worship in worship, and sometimes I'm just like absolutely taken away by the spirit of it. There's a couple of places in the sanctuary, they're odd places, but every time I'm there, I feel a sense of oneness. One is sometimes when I look all the way to the back window. You all see the front window, and that's a knockout, right? The blue window, the rose window. But I always look at that clear window in the back, and I think we're always called to go out and see forward, and so I always think of the window in the back. And then the first window, as I'm singing, and it's the first window right over there, I always see my mother in that window. And so it's interesting. And every single hymn that she loves to sing, you'll sometimes see me looking through that window, and I see my parents, my mother there. My mother had a beautiful voice. I sometimes hear her voice when I'm singing, so she's here. And it's always amazing to sing Phil with you at the 11 o'clock. So amazing moments in our worship. There are so many. I don't know if I could pull one out. I remember there are two that have been wonderful recently. One is when we laid our hands on Jenny Veninga when she left us to go away, and she was so completely moved by the power of the congregation to send her forward. And I don't know if you remember, she came up out of that sending forth prayer, transformed for God's work in the world. That always moves me. And then just recently, Kelly Ryan, the same thing, that when we laid our hands on her, she came up out of that prayer, transformed and ready for ministry. So I think it's those moments when I feel like, again, we're sending people forth into the world to be salt and light that are always transforming for me.
So we were calling this conversation "The View from Here," right? Which is the name of the article in the Carillon newsletter. So we had one question: was could you name some of the things that you initiated here at this church that has just kind of become part of the water, part of the general culture here? Like, did you come up with that title, for instance? Are there other things that you introduced that now are just second nature around here?
I think there are quite a few. Phil asked me this question, so I'll just name a few. When I first came, we had kind of a marble baptism font that we used to like crawl out when we did baptisms, and I felt like baptism is so central to our understanding of who we are that I got that big pot. I went down to Smith and what is that? The Gardner and Fourth, and got that big pot. And then I was doing some reading on baptism, and it also talked about shells, and that the water and the sand from the basement, from the ocean floor. So I went out and I got that big shell, and then we began doing baptisms in that way. I brought the Riverside baptism to you. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, one God, Mother of us all. I think we sort of just do that now, without thinking. But I think to some people it's like, oh, really? We've used special water. When I think about communion, we did move from the little trays to intinction, and we did that over the course of 2 or 3 years. But honestly, I think that really has created a different sense of communion and community when you're not passing it from person to person, but you're looking at each other, and you're actually tasting, and touching in a different way. The view from here was mine, and I wish Nat was here this morning, Natalie Lucchese. When I was looking for a home to live in, I kept looking in the Berkeley Flats because we were coming from Iowa, and like, can I afford to live, anywhere here? And Nat said, you need a home with a long view. You need a home with a long view. And my house has a beautiful long view. And so I loved the long view that Nat gave me. And I also just am still a fan of the view, right, with all those crazy women. And
it's like our own little The View. Right?
Yeah, we're having a view. And so I just created the view from here. And I always thought it's like a really nice, so what is my view? From where I sit, what might be my view? And so I think that's been a lovely title.
Well, speaking of your view from where you sit, as you're looking kind of the long view of the church, let's start with this church, Church Little C. What are some of your hopes, maybe dreams, or questions for the next chapter in the life of this church?
That's so fascinating, and I don't have any doubt but that we will go forward and we will be strong and we will be here a few generations from now. But I also feel that many congregations won't be. I feel that we're in a sea change, not only in the United Church, but in the mainline Protestant denomination. We're losing, I think we're losing like a church a week, the United Church of Christ. What does that mean? And I think for you all, my prayer would be that you would continue to see yourselves as very strong and make the investment to keep yourself strong. So that's continuing to look out, not in. Don't protect who you are at the expense of seeing what the future's going to be, and that's hard for people. You know, it's hard to let go so that something new might happen. It's a very difficult thing to do, but keep allowing yourself that amazing spiritual discipline of letting go so that you can see the future. My hope would be, and we'll see this, I think, in our conferences and in our national church, my hope would be that in the future there are hubs of congregational life. So my hope would be that FCCB could be a hub. There are many small churches in our vicinity, UCC and otherwise, folks who are gathering, and there are 12 people in that worship service. What would it mean if we invited them not in, but if we invited them to associate with us, and we offered to be part of the hub and offered our particular gifts in the hub? It might be administration, it might be worship, it might be music, it might be learning how to do small groups. What would that be like? And what would it be like if we offered, and this is my prayer for you, we offered kind of a sense of table ministry, that maybe we don't always need to gather in large worship settings, but maybe there's a table where 12 people or so are meeting on a Thursday night to enjoy a dinner together because they want to come around that table and because that table is sacred. So I think we'll see more and more of small groups. It also is going to become harder and harder for some people to make it to church. Thank goodness we have the website. Keep investing in the things that help us be a hub of progressive faith for many people. So I think the future for FCCB is strong and positive, but always understand the vulnerability of the gift that we have and be willing to open yourselves so that you can strengthen who you are for others, not for yourself, for others. That's the primary purpose of the gospel, is to really move out, go out into the world with open hands and open hearts, my first sermon here, so that you're strengthened for ministry beyond ourselves.
So you spoke a lot about the wider church. I'm wondering, the denomination you found a home in, United Church of Christ, you've gotten to serve as a national leader on the UCC and on a variety of boards. Zooming out even a little bit more, what do you see maybe has changed over the last 20 years or so from the UCC, and what do you think what do you think about our denomination's future?
Well, we're just about to elect a new president of our denomination. He's a conference minister coming from Arizona, really good. We're also going to, we're moving from a collegium to a more kind of president and council kind of setting. I think the United Church of Christ could have a strong future. I think it's progressive, and I think it's flag, it's thing that moves us into the world. But I think our denomination is vulnerable. We're a group, if we just look around, I'd say this is what our denomination looks like, us. There's a smattering of new life, but it's not always as strong as we'd like it to be. So I think we'll go through a lot of adjustments in the next period of time as our finances change and our vision changes. But I think we have, like I said, to us as an individual denomination, if we are really conscientious about staying open, there is a future before us.
Okay, now a few fun questions that got
Good.
thrown into the mix. What is your favorite hymn and why?
Oh. Well, my, you know,
A favorite.
my longtime favorite hymn, I guess I'll choose that one, but I have so many. My longtime favorite would be Great is Thy Faithfulness, and I learned how to sing that at Green Lake Calvary Baptist Church in Green Lake with my cousins when I was 10 years old, and I've sung it ever since. And I don't know if anyone remembers, but the next amazing time for me was William Sloane Coffin played it at my installation. He was still on the piano then, and he played it, and we all sang it, and so it was great to have Bill play that. He also played it on the piano in my parents' home the evening after my mother died, with my entire family gathered around, and we just let it rip and wailed it. And then it has been here for me at significant moments throughout.
I think we're singing it next week.
We are.
Yeah.
It's the opening hymn.
Yeah.
But all the music next week will be favorites of mine.
Okay, you're. I think you have a heckler, Pat. I think.
Great is thy faithfulness, Samuel. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me.
Amen. Okay.
Strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow is my favorite line. Yeah.
Okay, if you could sum up, this is another fun one. If you could sum up the story of our faith, the good news of the gospel, what it's all about, okay? You get 6 words or less. How would you do that?
If I was going to be biblical, I would do love your neighbor as yourself, but I'm going to go with St. Augustine, and I'm going to say the glory of God is the human being fully alive.
We'll let it slide. That works. Beautiful.
Yeah, so I just feel like, to love God and to live in a community and to be given the gift of faith, hope, and love is to be fully alive. And I feel most all of my life, I feel fully alive. And I think it's because I love and am deeply in love with God and know that God is always present through dark times and light times and in love. Fully alive.
Do you have a favorite season in the church life? I know you've reflected a little bit about when would you retire? Would it be, near Pentecost or Easter or?
Well, I love Pentecost. It's the birthday of the church. It's red and it's flaming tongues and, it's wild and it's wonderful and it's crazy. But ultimately, I would have to go with Easter week. And with that fabulous resurrection morning. And I think of the churches that I've pastored in and the places that I've been, and that journey to Easter Sunday is always profound. I remember when I left Riverside, I took the call to go to Des Moines on Good Friday, and I hated to leave Riverside. I just hated to leave. It was awful. And I felt really pretty just ripped apart by it. And then also Good Friday, I woke up on that Good Friday, and while I was dialing the phone to accept a new ministry, I realized it was also April Fool's Day. So, I just love being able to live my life in the religious calendar and then also just see the jokes along the way. So
God,
I'd have to go with Holy
surprises.
Week and certainly Easter Sunday.
Beautiful. Well, I could just keep asking you questions, but I think I'll also open it up to see if there's anyone who has a burning question who you'd like to hear Pat reflect on a little bit.
Pat, a few of us are like you, are getting pretty familiar with what I still call the R word. And I know that you don't go poof when you do the R word. but what is your...
Oh, retirement?
Oh, I thought he meant resurrection.
I thought he meant reformed.
But what is on your mind, Sam too, but on your mind as you head back to Africa, South Africa, one of the world's great places?
Great.
What's on my mind heading towards South Africa?
Right.
Great anticipation for folks who know. So I'm leaving for South Africa May 18, and Sam's coming on June 2nd. And I'll be there for 3 months, and I'll be at the Rondebosch United Church of Christ. I think what's on my mind as I head towards South Africa is being able to do parish ministry in a totally unique and amazing setting. And so I'm very excited about that. I know the congregation. I've preached there before. Robert, who is the pastor, is a very strong friend and a colleague of mine. He has an amazing ministry that he does. He works in prisons, and so I'll also be the chaplain at Polesmore Prison for the month that I'm there, so I'll head out to Polesmore Prison, Bonnie, a morning a week, and we'll be working with those guys out there. So what's on my mind is just being able to do what I love to do and know how to do so well in a completely different setting in a town, a city, which I think is like the most beautiful city in the world after ours. And I got that in. And most of all, I think I'm looking forward, because it will be hard to be separated from all of you. I'm looking forward, I think, to kind of that distance where, my heart can rest and be excited and also heal from saying goodbye to all of you, which is a pretty profound experience.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The other R word, yeah.
There is. And there's quite a Dutch Reformed presence, of course, and apartheid came up out of the Boers. This congregation was founded as a response to apartheid. It's an anti-apartheid congregation. It was founded by university professors at the University of Cape Town in the late 40s as a response. John de Gruchy, who is a liberation theologian and really South Africa's liberation theologian, was a founding member of this congregation. And he is 70 kilometers away. Sam and I will be going to spend time with him, and he'll come up to see us. So, there's a lot of stuff in that culture that kind of reminds me of where I've been, and it's the worst of where I've been. But then there's also amazing people in that story. I don't know if you know Byers Naude, but he was a Dutch Reformed pastor leading one of the largest churches, Johannesburg, and he became an anti-apartheid activist, and they threw him out. And I got to know Byers Naude in the 80s, and for me, he was a champion of what it means to be Dutch and Calvinist, to stand for justice and the rights of everyone.
I would just like to say that the Rondebosch Church, where Pat is going, have our open and affirming statement in their church brochure right in the pews. So that was pretty amazing to see.
Actually, David Harrison and Claudine, who are members here, brought it back.
Oh my goodness. Maybe we can tell them about our transgender amendment.
Yeah, they're way ahead of us on this one, I'm afraid. They have it in their constitution.
Wow.
Open and affirming.
Fantastic.
In the South African Constitution.
Yeah, Eric.
So here's a seminarian question. Pat, I hear how in your ministry you have, you've been part of some beginnings of things, and you've also shown up for and walked into some remarkable things that were already happening. Now, at this point, after the experience you have, if you were to envision a new church and be part of starting one from scratch, what would you like to see it look like?
It's funny that you asked that, Eric, because sometimes I have dreams about this, which is interesting. When I think about it, I think that it would be smaller, and it might not quite have a physical infrastructure that this place has, because lots of energy goes into maintaining a physical plant. I think that it would be focused for me around worship, and that the worship and the ritual that would come out of that would send us forth into the world to be change makers and make a difference in the world, and to stand for justice and righteousness is a word that I love and wish we could do more with. So I think the next congregation I'm a part of, if I'm a worshiping member or if I'm a leader, it might be centered around worship, because worship really grounds me, but always sends me forth. Where I want to spend energy going forward actually is with young leaders, and working with the next, as you know, I'm chair of the Beatitudes Society, which nurtures young people for the next reiteration in their communities. And so I probably put a lot of my time and energy in a new congregation into the next generation.
Thank you. I see a hand. Is that no? Anyone else? Well, Pat, I think as you prepare for your last Sunday, as you prepare to go off to South Africa and on to the next chapter, you've given us, especially on staff, but the entire congregation, a real gift in saying goodbye well. And that's an art and a skill too. So to just say thank you for that. I just, from Plymouth in Des Moines, which you know well, just encountered another senior minister transition. So could you just reflect a little bit? You touched on the going far away as part of the healing from that, but what does it mean to say goodbye well? And what would you want from us? How can we support you in that?
Good. That's a lovely question. So the person that you're referring to is David Rui, who I just want to say David's name because I feel like David has been a partner for me in ministry for a long time. He started at Plymouth, and I started here at FCCB on the same day, March 1, 1994. And David just retired last November. And so we walked the whole walk with each other. In the last 15 years, David and I have been instrumental and co-chaired the senior ministers of the United Church of Christ together. So he has been my colleague throughout. And I really watched David, who's about 6 months ahead of me, 4 months ahead of me, and how he left and tried to incorporate that myself. I also worked with a coach in leaving that was very helpful. So the question is...
Yeah, the question is how as we see how you've modeled saying goodbye well, how do we say goodbye well, and how can we support you in that?
Be excited about the future. And I just talked with one of the chairs of the search committee over getting a glass of water, and the future is coming. You guys have done this whole separation with me so beautifully. I hope that you give the next senior minister as much love, as much grace, and as much leeway as you gave me. And the leeway, I think, is mistakes are always made, right, in ministry. You know, we can't always have every single conversation be as wonderful as we would love to have it be. We can't always minister to you as perfectly as we would like and as you would expect of us. So I think forgiveness is a great gift in community. Sometimes we don't think to ask it of our staff. We think our staff maybe is perfect, or if they're not, we kind of, decide we're not going to love them as deeply as we should. Oh my, love deeply and unconditionally and create that broad birth of, I think, love, hope, and forgiveness that every pastor needs, especially as he or she is coming into a new congregation. There's so much to learn. And tell the new pastors your stories. When I look around, I think I know each one of your stories. And you have shared those stories and that journey with me for 21 years. And I feel that those are stories that are written on my heart and that I will never forget and that I will always, always treasure. So tell your new pastors your stories, and tell each other your stories. It's what makes the fabric of a congregation, to be able to share our stories and listen to the new stories that are coming, and the new dreams and the new hopes. I think the greatest gift that you've given me in the last year has been doing our departure this way. And you all have been so wonderful to me, honoring me and keeping in relationship with me, many of you, as you also have moved ahead. And so that's a particular gift I think you have given me, that you've also seen what's coming and you're excited about it, but you've also taken time to acknowledge me and acknowledge the life that we've had together. So that's a great gift, right? To be able to hold the present and give thanks for the past, and to be totally, wildly excited about what's coming ahead. And I just see Louise's face, and so it's important for me to be able to say also that the staff has been so instrumental to me in being able to stay here and not depart too soon. You know, to be able to stay loving and connected, even as I'm really departing and moving on, and so many things are calling me forward. It's been really nice also to feel totally grounded here in life in a congregation and in a church. And I think the last thing that you can help me with, and I think that's a really lovely question, is to really honor and respect boundaries, especially in these next couple of years. And that's to be able to let me go and to do it well. I remember when Adam wrote, when he left, he wrote something about Facebook. Thank God I don't keep up my Facebook page. But I think to just be able to honor the boundaries that we do have with each other. I'll see you again. It will be at the invitation of your next senior minister. So, you know, we need some space, we need some distance, both of us. And I will pray for you, as I said at the 9 o'clock, and think about you, and be so excited for you and your future. And we also need to have that rest space so that we can grieve and see the future, what our futures are going to be, in a different way. There's a great, Neil, I wish I had it, there's a great line and something that Neil shared with the personnel committee, and it said, and now we set off on different paths. And that's really, I think, what this moment is. We set off on different paths, and exciting for both of us, right?
Well, we will also think of you and pray for you, and we thank you. Thank you.
Is the mic on? Yeah, just before we leave, I was in New York this past week. I had two meetings.